So, the session is over for about a week. It's terrific. And one of the heroes of the session, I think, Kevin Lundberg, State Senator from Larimer County. Before we get on to what we want to talk about, just curious, the hospital provider fee. I've never seen guys lobbied so much to get a round table without a public vote as the Republicans in the state Senate this year.
$700 million is a lot of money.
$700 without a vote.
Yeah, it's basically just taking a lid off Tabor. And it also ignores a very salient fact, and that is within Tabor it says when an enterprise is established that you have to lower the base if you take that out of the general fund. So, you know, they had some legal finagling to try to fix that, quote unquote, but really, they were just breaking the rules all the way around.
Well, but they know that the Colorado State Supreme Court will always be in their pocket of ruling against Tabor.
That seems to be the case.
So the idea that if they pass this and somebody comes up and says, well, then you've got to lower the base by that $700 million, I think they'd be just fine.
Probably so as a practical sense, but still, for policy, when we looked at it on the Republican side in the Senate, it's like, this is a non-starter. You know, it's growing government too much, and it's breaking all the rules doing it.
Yeah, well, what really bothers me is that the argument's never about spending. We've increased Medicaid spending thanks to Obamacare by what, 330%?
Medicaid is almost $10 billion. Medicaid is almost $10 billion in Colorado.
The state.
And our budget is what, $27 billion?
Right.
Well, 10 of that is Medicaid.
And that's where the money went.
Exactly.
You can't increase a line item by 330% and then expect us to go, oh, we'll just,
We've run out of money. How come?
Yeah, as we predict. All right, talking about money problems. There are money problems not only here, but on D.C. We are massively in debt. There are certain restraints on you as a legislator that our Washington delegation doesn't need to worry about. You're going to be term limited in a couple years, thanks to the initiative process here, which brought forward that. You have to live under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which you didn't want to, which a lot of people didn't want to do.
I voted for it every time.
But we, the people, were able to put that restriction on you.
Exactly.
Even saying with Amendment 23, you have to spend this much. We're tying your hands because we have the ability to put things on the ballot and force you to do these things. Open meetings laws, open records laws, these wouldn't happen without the initiative. D.C. doesn't have that problem. So they say, oh yeah, we'd love to have term limits or balanced budget amendment, but that's never going to happen.
Yeah, and that's because they make the rules, of course, you know, or they have thus far. It's actually Article 5 in the U.S. Constitution that's concerning amending the Constitution. And we've done it 27 times, and we've always done it by the first method, which is Congress proposes amendments and then the states ratify. But Article 5 has two paths. The other one is the states call for a convention of amending the Constitution to create amendments, and then the second step is still the same. It goes back to the states for ratification, even as it does with Congress.
Now, this is part that I never got those civic lessons in high school, that the states actually can amend the Constitution and bring it forward for all the states to vote on.
Right.
We understand that things get put on as amendment from the Congress, it goes to the states ratify it, and before you know it, we have prohibition or lifting prohibition or whatever the amendment du jour is. You're telling me there's a way that we could pass a balanced budget amendment, a taxpayer bill of rights, a term limit initiative, these things from states like Colorado over the objections of Congressmen.
Yeah, let me give you a quick little history lesson. When the Constitution was being written, before they finished it up, it was George Mason who raised his hand and say, wait a minute, if Congress is the one to initiate the amendments, then if anything is to control Congress, they're not going to do it. And so he was the guy who argued for, let's have another path. And they all agreed and put it into Article 5. And actually it was Alexander Hamilton who was not necessarily putting the states in charge all the time. He was a real Federalist in the, Federalist, anti-Federalist stuff. But in the Federalist Paper number 85, here's the civics assignment, go read it, he explains this is why we put Article 5 together this way, so that if Congress ever got out of control, the states could take it back into their own hands and say, we're going to fix this by changing the Constitution. And there are There's a very serious effort out there right now to demand a balanced budget at the federal level. 29 states have already called for this convention. You need 34, you need 2/3, so we're
29
getting pretty
already.
close.
That's
Right.
huge. All right, let me push back a little bit on this, because I've heard this. You know, what you're suggesting is a convention of states for the purpose of calling for an amendment.
Correct.
Right? So this is a convention to amend, and I've heard scare tactics by a lot of people who are easily scared, saying, no, we can't call a constitutional convention because then it'll open up the entire Constitution, and the left is going to turn us into Russia because it's going to rip. You know,
They're going to throw the Bill of
Right.
Rights away.
Right.
Second Amendment's gone.
Right. So
et cetera.
there's been
Yeah.
one constitutional convention, and it worked surprisingly well. Describe the difference. Why should I not be afraid that this is going to roll out of control, that we're going to call a convention and the whole Constitution is up for grabs?
First, you've got to read Article 5. It's a very simple paragraph, really. But Article 5 says...
in the United States Constitution.
Correct, correct. In the U.S. Constitution, and it describes the amending process. Article 5 convention is only for the purpose of proposing amendments, even as Congress can do every day they meet. By a 2/3 vote of both houses, they can put an amendment out there, and then 3/4 of the states have to ratify it. So too with a constitutional. Stop me.
All right.
I
a
make the
convention
mistake.
to propose.
Yeah, because you're
you
right.
want to know
so
why?
many people have said
because
that.
for the last 20 years,
Yeah.
I've heard, Eagle Forum and people go, oh my God, you can't do this, and they were petrified.
Yeah.
And now, because we didn't do this, we've got a runaway federal government that Colorado has no say in.
We have such a significant problem in so many areas with the federal government. I, as a state legislator, I jumped into this because I've seen for the last 14 years how everything we do at the state level is mandated and controlled and manipulated by Congress, by the federal government, by the presidency, by Supreme Court rulings. And I'm reading the Constitution and how our nation was founded. It's supposed to be a balance. Well, Article 5 was set there to put that balance back in proper registration.
The whole idea of the United States Constitution was a check and balance.
Correct.
After fighting off a tyrant, they realized governments are dangerous things. So we need to have these checks and balances. And the states, we forget this, formed the federal government. And now the federal government is lording over the states. There was that safety valve by design. Has that safety valve ever been used?
It has been attempted many times, and we've gotten close several times. I don't believe there's been as serious an effort nor as great a need as we have today. There are people all over the country who are working to call for a convention to propose amendments, and there are different efforts. There's a term limits one. I actually ran a resolution this year in the Colorado legislature calling for a convention to propose term limits at the congressional level. Believe me, there's some pluses and minuses at the state level, but Congress needs some guardrails, and that's one of them. I believe it's appropriate.
Did it pass?
No. No. But at least I threw it out there to say, let's look at this. The first and best step, I believe, is a balanced budget, and therefore a balanced budget amendment would be most appropriate. There's another effort called Convention of the States that's a little more general, where they're calling for term limits, balanced budget, and other limitations on the Supreme Court, on the federal government, so as to, again, recalibrate, put that sense of federalism back in place.
Well, first of all, there are people on the right who need to get over the fear of this. Because I don't see any other way with a Congress that's out of control.
Exactly.
I just don't see any way for states to have a way back. But let me play devil's advocate.
You would.
Yeah. If you're successful and you get a balanced budget amendment going, and this purpose is going, now that the states are so dependent upon federal money, mostly printed up money and made from debt.
These are debt dollars.
These are debt dollars. They don't really exist. We're printing money. But states have become so addicted to those federal dollars that in in a period where we need our money for Obamacare, for the Medicaid expansion that is squeezing our budget right now. 330% increase. One out of every 5 people in Colorado now are on government health care. Why would legislators push for this, knowing it's going to cause you a budget problem next year, and you're the one who's going to deal with it?
Well, this is where it's both the problem and the opportunity. The problem is, yeah, we've got to deal with balancing the budget, but guess what? The opportunity is, if we did that, the nation's economy would be on such solid ground that we would prosper and flourish like in ways we have yet to even dream of. I am convinced that if we can put this in place, if we can put the states back in charge of what they ought to be in charge of and hold the federal government within their limits, we'll actually see a renaissance within our nation in so many areas. That's why that's job number one. It's where
easy for
really
you to say a constitutionally driven legislator, but there are a lot of legislators out there who make their constituents happy by giving them things.
That's the political challenge, right? But I'm in for the battle. You know, been doing it for years, and I'm going to keep it up.
Let's talk tactics for a second. You said there's 29 states that have already passed a call to have a convention of states for the purpose of proposing amendments for a balanced budget amendment.
Correct.
That's huge. I didn't realize it was that large. Is Colorado among them?
Yes, Colorado is. That was back in 1978, I believe it was. But our neighbors to the north in Wyoming, they are not. So I've been working and encouraging them to do that. I believe Utah, Idaho, Arizona, they have not. You need 34 states. Just within the Rocky Mountain region, we're almost positioned to make the difference. Right now, Minnesota is the real target. I understand they're still in session, and the goal is to maybe get them across. Oklahoma went in just a few weeks ago.
So with 34, a convention is called. Who runs it?
That's the delegates come from the states, and it's one state, one vote, even as it should be, because these are states, not, you know, this isn't the general population. And
so every legislature sends somebody.
Figures it out.
All 50 of them.
Correct.
Incredible.
Correct. And then the convention, they make the rules, but they have to work within the Article 5 framework, which is the only job they've got to do is to propose amendments. That's it.
Kevin, thank you so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Make it happen. Listen for me on KHOW Radio. Check out the Independence Institute, independenceinstitute.org, and we'll see you next week.